Richard Flaherty, the giant killer.
He always said he wanted to be a military. He always wanted to be a military. And he knew at the time that his height might prevent him from getting in. And matter of fact, the first time he applied, they turned him down. So Walter, at this point, was a lawyer. So he asked Walter to write the congressman and have the politicians put a word into the Army about this little guy who's, he wants to do this. And they finally approved it. It took a couple of years. And then when he went, he was underweight. And he said, they told him, you have to gain some weight. You have to beef up a little bit, which he did. And he started lifting weights and everything. And they were gonna let him in with his height. He was just too skinny at the time. Yeah. So he did that, and he beefed up and worked really hard. And he told him, he says, I can do it. I can do it. Why, just give me a chance, I can do it.
And he was the littlest person in the United States military. He got a special congressional waiver, I guess it was, to go into the military.
He never made a complaint about boot camp or about it being unfair, or that they should make some sort of accommodation because of the height disadvantage.
He would jump out of the plane first. They'd watch to see where he went, and then they'd circle around and jump the rest of the company after him.
You're going to exit an aircraft in a Special Forces training operation. You're going to be carrying generators, you're going to be carrying weapons, you got your parachute system. So you'd be jumping anywhere from 80 to 100 pounds easily. So that's a lot of stuff to carry. When you're only 4'9", it's that much harder to carry that. In fact, his rucksack, which he was strapped on below your reserve parachute, it had to be close to hanging on the ground. For him to get out of the aircraft with his rucksack down here on his shins, that's pretty tough to move. The rest of us, it was maybe at our knees, but he would have had it down close to his feet. So it's physically harder for him to do that. I would have never even questioned his ability to do it, because just from the standpoint of who he was, he's just tough, so he could do it.
He did it, and that's hard training. It's hard stuff to get through. There's a lot of guys to this day that put in for SF training and never make it. A lot of guys put in for, 101st Airborne stuff, and they never make it. But you saw those pictures that you had of him with all his military stuff on, running with a rifle. And the caption was, I think, smallest man in the military.
Captain Rick Lencioni invited me up to the 101st Airborne's reunion to see if I could find more men that knew Richard. I thought that they might be reluctant to talk to me because I was a stranger in their world. But it was the opposite. They gladly shared their experiences and stories with me, hoping the next generation understands the sacrifices they and their friends gave for their country.
That's when we arrived.
When you first got to Vietnam?
Right. Well, we didn't know what we were going to really get into when we left Fort Campbell. We found out in a hurry, especially in January, February 1968, when the Tet Offense was kicked off. We found out right quick what it was like to be in Vietnam. Well, the first time I saw him, it was sort of funny because he was a real little guy, and we thought it was a joke to start with, but turned out that he was our platoon leader.
I never seen anybody smaller than him on there, other than the Vietnamese.
But everybody knew Richard. He stood out.
For a little guy, he had a big voice, and his voice carried. Maybe it was something he had practiced, but it worked.
Was it a little strange to see a guy that small?
It was very strange. When I first looked at him, I did a double take.
But I remember seeing recon platoon going across the rice paddy over there. They were just kind of all spread out, moving across there, and he was right in the front, leading, had his map out, he was looking at the map, and he had this big stogie. Stogie was bigger than him, but I remember he was leading and they were following, and to me, I said, he's a good leader.
There was a doubt that he was in charge. I saw the respect that was there too, because they knew that he could be stringent at times.
He always had that attitude. He had that tough guy attitude. Even though he was really short, he was always really tough looking and always very outspoken and forceful individual. But he was very smug, too. He was very smug about it. He just had that attitude. He was a tough little prick, but they like tough little pricks when you're in combat. They don't want that, milk toasty guy.
He was full of fire, They're always willing to go, willing to do whatever needs to be done.
We would get these telegrams, your son has been wounded. And then a week or less later, we get another telegram, he's back in action again. So his wounds didn't stop him from carrying out his mission.
That motherfucker's tough. Yeah. A lot of respect for that guy. He is a tough son of a bitch.
One thing I didn't notice about Richard right away was he was pretty tough on the enemy. At that point, there were no prisoners being taken, and I don't know if that was Richard's doing or not, but he certainly didn't show any emotion towards what had happened. It was when Flaherty and I did the operation, sweeping the village, going down, we were actually on opposite sides of a river. And I think it was in what we called the 8-click-ville at that time. It was this long 8,000-meter village that ran with a river running through it. And it was a known area where you're going to get contact. You never went in the 8-click-ville without running into the enemy. For some reason, they just kept coming back there. And so we're doing a sweep, and my unit had jumped some North Vietnamese and Viet Cong on one side of the river. And we shot several of them, but they weren't dead. And I was going to call for a medevac helicopter, a dust-off, to get them out of there. So, because I had the medics work on them, and it looked like, okay, well, they're about as stable as they're going to get. And so I'm radioing over to Richard, and I said, I've got 2 Victor Charlie WIA. And he said, Roger, 2 Victor Charlie KIA. And I said, no, WIA. I said, so, Whiskey India Alpha. And he says, no, he kept coming back with the KIA. And I knew what he was saying, because he was saying basically, let's just move on, kill them, let's just go. And I had guys in my platoon that were looking at me going, no, we don't want to do this. And so I said, no, we're going to evacuate them. And I made Richard stand down and wait till we got a chopper in there. A lot of things that happened like that over there, as soon as it was over, you forgot about it. Later on in the tour, I became Richard's company commander. So now he's still platoon leader, he's reporting to me. He came in one time to come see me, and Richard would wear this revolver on his hip, and it had white handles on it, almost like a pearl handle type revolver. I have no idea what it was really made of, but that's what it looked like. It was like a 6-gun. And he took it out of the holster and pointed it at me. And he's smiling, and he spun it back and put it back in the holster. And then he does it again. Now, we haven't really said a word to each other. And he puts it back in the holster. He's smiling all this time. And I had my rifle down like this, and I went click, click, which goes from basically safe to full automatic. And he heard that. I said, Richard, if that clears that holster again, I'm going to stitch you from your toes to the top of your head. And he just looked at me and smiled, and he turned around and walked away. He never said a word during that whole encounter. I was the only one to talk.
Why do you think he did that?
Get a reaction from me. He wanted to see what I'd do, see if he could scare me.
He looked for a fight. So I asked him one day, hey, you got any trouble lately? He said, no, but I'm looking for some,
In late summer of '68, I was listening in on the battalion net, and a recon platoon, which Richard was commanding at the time, had come into contact with a large NVA force, which was, I don't know if we ever really determined how big the force was, but it was a lot larger than his recon platoon. They had set up a defensive perimeter, and they were being attacked all night long. The NVA, their purpose was to overrun them, to basically kill every one of them. And nobody ever had it in their mind that they were going to surrender. So, and I can guarantee you in Richard's platoon, that was not a thought that anybody would have. They're not going to surrender. And the fight began, and they fought all night long. They fought with everything they had. A lot of them became casualties. In fact, I think probably a majority of the platoon with some type of casualty, either killed or wounded. But in the morning, they came out of it. And the ones that were left, that were still able to fight, had fought all through the night. They killed, I don't want to say 100, but probably close to that of North Vietnamese were killed in that engagement. There was a big pile of MVA dead around them, but they were still there. And Richard commanded that whole thing. Nobody could get to him. The last thing you ever want to do is run out of ammunition. And I'm sure that night he was probably getting close to it. And I heard nothing on the net that night that indicated he was getting any form of relief. And they couldn't have done an airdrop into a tight perimeter like that. You'd probably be giving it to the North Vietnamese. You know, you can't be that pinpoint accurate on an airdrop. Richard had several casualties. It was just constant. I mean, all of us did. I don't know if he lost more than others or not. He was a very aggressive officer, so there's a chance that he would have lost more people because he was very aggressive and moving to contact to engage the enemy. But I can tell you that his men didn't rebel against him for that because they trusted him.
As far as being a good platoon leader, I think he done an outstanding job.